the circular ruins. And if he left off dreaming about you, through the looking glass. 6. No one saw him slip from the boat in the unanimous night. No one saw the bamboo canoe as it sank into the sacred mud. And yet, within days, there was no one who did not know that the taciturn man had come there from the south, and that his homeland was one of those infinite villages that lie upriver on the violet flank of the mountain, where the language of the Zend is uncontaminated by Greek, and where leprosy is uncommon. But, in fact, the grey man had kissed the mud, scrambled up the steep bank, without pushing back, probably without even feeling the sharp-leaved bulrushes that slashed his flesh, and dragged himself, faint and bloody, to the circular enclosure, crowned by the stone figure of a horse or tiger, which had once been the colour of fire, but was now the colour of ashes. That ring was a temple devoured by an ancient holocaust. Now the malarial jungle had profaned it, and its god went unhonoured by mankind. The foreigner lay down at the foot of the pedestal. He was awakened by the sun, high in the sky. He examined his wounds, and saw, without astonishment, that they had healed. He closed his pale eyes, and slept, not out of any weakness of the flesh, but out of willed determination. He knew that this temple was the place that his unconquerable plan called for. He knew that the unrelenting trees had not succeeded in strangling the ruins of another promising temple downriver, like this one, a temple to dead, incinerated gods. He knew that his immediate obligation was to sleep. About midnight, he was awakened by the inconsolable cry of a bird. Prints of unshod feet, a few figs, and a jug of water told him that the men of the region had respectfully spied upon his sleep, and that they sought his favour, or feared his magic. He felt the coldness of fear, and he sought out a tomb-like niche in the crumbling wall, where he covered himself with unknown leaves. The goal that led him on was not impossible, though it was clearly supernatural. He wanted to dream a man. He wanted to dream him completely, in painstaking detail, and impose him upon reality. This magical objective had come to fill his entire soul. If someone had asked him his own name, or inquired into any feature of his life till then, he would not have been able to answer. The uninhabited and crumbling temple suited him, for it was a minimum of visible world. So did the proximity of the woodcutters, for they saw to his frugal needs. The rice and fruit of their tribute were nourishment enough for his body, which was consecrated to the sole task of sleeping and dreaming. At first, his dreams were chaotic. A little later, they became dialectical. The foreigner dreamed that he was in the center of a circular amphitheater, which was, somehow, the ruined temple. Clouds of taciturn students completely filled the terraces of seats. The faces of those farthest away hung at many centuries' distance, and at a cosmic height, yet they were absolutely clear. The man lectured on anatomy, cosmography, magic. The faces listened earnestly, intently, and attempted to respond with understanding, as though they sensed the importance of that education that would redeem one of them from his state of hollow appearance and insert him into the real world. The man, both in sleep and when awake, pondered his phantasm's answers. He did not allow himself to be taken in by impostors, and he sensed, in certain perplexities, a growing intelligence. He was seeking a soul worthy of taking its place in the universe. On the 9th or 10th night, he realized with some bitterness that nothing could be expected from those students who passively accepted his teachings, but only from those who might occasionally, in a reasonable way, venture an objection. The first, the accepting, though worthy of affection and a degree of sympathy, would never emerge as individuals. The latter, those who, sometimes questioned, had a bit more pre-existence. One afternoons now paid their tribute to sleep as well. Now the man was awake no more than 2 or 3 hours around daybreak. He dismissed the vast illusory classroom once and for all, and retained but a single pupil, a taciturn, sallow-skinned young man, at times intractable, with sharp features that echoed those of the man that dreamed him. The pupil was not disconcerted for long by the elimination of his classmates. After only a few of the private classes, his progress amazed his teacher. Yet, disaster would not be forestalled. One day, the man emerged from sleep as though from a vicious desert, looked up at the hollow light of the evening, which for a moment he confused with the light of dawn, and realized that he had not dreamed. All that night, and the next day, the unbearable lucidity of insomnia harried him like a hawk. He went off to explore the jungle, hoping to tire himself. Among the hemlocks, he managed no more than a few intervals of feeble sleep, fleetingly veined with the most rudimentary of visions, useless to him. He reconvened his class, but no sooner had he spoken a few brief words of exhortation than the faces blurred, twisted, and faded away. In his almost perpetual state of wakefulness, tears of anger burned the man's old eyes. He understood that the task of molding the incoherent and dizzying stuff that dreams are made of is the most difficult work a man can undertake, even if he fathom all the enigmas of the higher and lower spheres, much more difficult than weaving a rope of sand or minting coins of the faceless wind. He understood that initial failure was inevitable. He swore to put behind him the vast hallucination that at first had drawn him off the track, and he sought another way to approach his task. Before he began, he devoted a month to recovering the strength his delirium had squandered. He abandoned all premeditation of dreaming, and, almost instantly, managed to sleep for a fair portion of the day. The few times he did dream during this period, he did not focus on his dreams. He would wait to take up his task again until the disk of the moon was whole. Then, that evening, he purified himself in the waters of the river, bowed down to the planetary gods, uttered those syllables of a powerful name that it is lawful to pronounce, and laid himself down to sleep. Almost immediately, he dreamed a beating heart. He dreamed the heart warm, active, secret, about the size of a closed fist, a garnet-colored thing inside the dimness of a human body that was still faceless and sexless. He dreamed it with painstaking love for 14 brilliant nights. Each night he perceived it with greater clarity, greater certainty. He did not touch it. He only witnessed it, observed it, corrected it, perhaps, with his eyes. He perceived it. He lived it from many angles, many distances. On the 14th night, he stroked the pulmonary artery with his forefinger, and then the entire heart, inside and out. And his inspection made him proud. He deliberately did not sleep the next night. Then he took up the heart again, invoked the name of a planet, and set about dreaming another of the major organs. Before the year was out, he had reached the skeleton, the eyelids. The countless hairs of the body were perhaps the most difficult task. The man who dreamed a fully fleshed man, a stripling, but this youth did not stand up or speak, nor could it open its eyes. Night after night, the man dreamed the youth asleep. In the cosmogonies of the Gnostics, the demiurges knead up a red Adam who cannot manage to stand. As rude and inept and elementary as that atom of dust was, the atom of dream wrought from the sorcerer's nights. One afternoon, the man almost destroyed his creation, but he could not bring himself to do it. He'd have been better off if he had. After making vows to all the deities of the earth and the river, he threw himself at the feet of the idol that was perhaps a tiger or perhaps a colt, and he begged for its untried aid. That evening, at sunset, the statue filled his dreams. In the dream, it was alive and trembling, yet It was not the dread-inspiring hybrid form of horse and tiger it had been. It was, instead, these two vehement creatures, plus bull and rose and tempest, too, and all that, simultaneously. The manifold god revealed to the man that its earthly name was fire, and that, in that circular temple and others like it, men had made sacrifices and worshipped it, and that it would magically bring to life the phantasm the man had dreamed, so fully bring him to life that every creature, save fire itself, and the man who dreamed him, would take him for a man of flesh and blood. Fire ordered the dreamer to send the youth, once instructed in the rites, to that other ruined temple, whose pyramids still stood downriver, so that a voice might glorify the god in that deserted place. In the dreaming man's dream, the dreamed man awoke. The sorcerer carried out Fire's instructions. He consecrated a period of time, which in the end encompassed 2 full years, to revealing to the youth the arcana of the universe and the secrets of the cult of fire. Deep inside, it grieved the man to separate himself from his creation. Under the pretext of pedagogical necessity, he drew out the hours of sleep more every day. He also redid the right shoulder, which was perhaps defective. From time to time, he was disturbed by a sense that all this had happened before. His days were, in general, happy. When he closed his eyes, he would think, "Now I will be with my son." Or, less frequently, "The son I have engendered is waiting for me, and he will not exist if I do not go to him." Gradually, the man accustomed the youth to reality. Once, he ordered him to set a flag on a distant mountaintop. The next day, the flag crackled on the summit. He attempted other, similar experiments, each more daring than the last. He saw, with some bitterness, that his son was ready, perhaps even impatient to be born. That night, he kissed him for the first time, then set him off, through many leagues of impenetrable jungle, many leagues of swamp, to that other temple, whose ruins bleached in the sun downstream. But first, so that the son would never know that he was a phantasm, so that he would believe himself to be a man like other men, the man infused in him a total lack of memory of his years of education. The man's victory and his peace were dulled by the wearisome sameness of his days. In the twilight hours of dusk and dawn, he would prostrate himself before the stone figure, imagining perhaps that his unreal son performed identical rituals in other circular ruins downstream. At night, he did not dream, or dreamed the dreams that all men dream. His perceptions of the universe's sounds and shapes were somewhat pale. The absent sun was nourished by those diminutions of his soul. His life's goal had been accomplished. The man lived on now, in a sort of ecstasy. After a period of time, which some tellers of the story choose to compute in years, others in decades, 2 rowers woke the man at midnight. He could not see their faces, but they told him of a magical man in a temple in the north, a man who could walk on fire and not be burned. The sorcerer suddenly remembered the god's words. He remembered that of all the creatures on the earth, fire was the only one who knew that his son was a phantasm. That recollection, comforting at first, came soon to torment him. He feared that his son would meditate upon his unnatural privilege and somehow discover that he was a mere simulacrum. To be not a man, but the projection of another man's dream. What incomparable humiliation! What vertigo! Every parent feels concern for the children he has procreated, or allowed to be procreated, in happiness or in mere confusion. It was only natural that the sorcerer should fear for the future of the son he had conceived, organ by organ, feature by feature, through 1,001 secret nights. The end of his meditations came suddenly, but it had been foretold by certain signs. First, after a long drought, a distant cloud, as light as a bird, upon the mountain top. Then, toward the south, the sky, the pinkish color of a leopard's gums. Then the clouds of smoke that rusted the iron of the nights. Then, at last, the panicked flight of the animals, for that which had occurred hundreds of years ago was being repeated now. The ruins of the sanctuary of the god of fire were destroyed by fire. In the birdless dawn, the sorcerer watched the concentric holocaust close in upon the walls. For a moment, he thought of taking refuge in the water, but then he realized that death would be a crown upon his age and absolve him from his labors. He walked into the tatters of flame, but they did not bite his flesh. They caressed him, bathed him, without heat and without combustion. With relief, with humiliation, with terror, he realized that he, too, was but appearance, that another man was dreaming him.